Hi.
You're on, it was recorded.
Am I on and ready to go? All right. Let me make sure I've got all the buttons pushed correctly. That's all pushed right. All right, we're going to wrap this up today. Gary and I were just talking about something that recently found, and somebody sent the information to me, and I don't know who it was, but if it was one of you, thank you. In a cliff in England, the erosion has brought to light a new animal, a new creature that's not been known before. And what is eroding away is the head of whatever follows, the body that follows the head. And the head is an extremely large head. And they called it a terrible sea monster. And so it'll be interesting to find out what follows. But that's brand new. That animal has not been seen or detected before. So keep watching for stuff like that on the internet. All right, we're going to get into something, another one of those inconvenient truths. Something that shows up that's just not supposed to be there. It makes this idea of evolution animals dying out millions of years ago before humans were even around. That philosophy, that religion, and that's all it is a religion, that sometimes just runs head on to a fact that cannot be dismissed. And as Dawkins said, one of the guys who was premier leader of the evolutionary idea that these animals died off before man got here, if you remember the comment he said is, as an evolutionist, we don't need proof. We just know it's correct. If you said that, of course, they would chop your legs off real short. You've got to prove things. And the Bible tells us, prove all things. Well, now, does that mean I've got to prove that man and dinosaurs lived at the same time because the Bible talks about it? Yep, you sure do. And if you're not up on that argument, everybody else is around you, especially the kids getting educated from the time they're able to walk. They have dinosaurs in their hands and they listen to it on Disney Channel. They listen to it on all these different TV deals, even in, not Walmart, but in all these other stores it talks about, dinosaurs, and millions of years ago they died out. And one particular symposium I was doing in Texas on dinosaurs in the Bible. This little girl came up, she's not even in kindergarten yet. She came up with her dinosaur and she said, I have a question. And I thought, okay, well, coming from a pre-kindergarten person, it probably would be a pretty simple question. She said, why does my dinosaur have fingers on this side and a claw or a finger on this side? And I thought, goodness, I'm going to go back to teaching college. Those kids didn't ask those kind of questions that were so deep. I told her, I said, I do not know. She said, you're supposed to know everything. And I said, somebody led you astray. But the kids know all this stuff. They know all these questions. They know all this stuff that's been put on their shoulders. Now we have to be able to go in and defend the Bible. That's our job. That's your job, is to defend the truth. And if that means you got to stay up and study a little bit on a subject you're not familiar with, do it. Do it. You'll surprise your grandkids. They'll say, Grandma, you know about Triceratops? Then you got their attention. All right, let's jump in. This one is a really an unusual, but it's a question I get asked continuously. I'll point that in the right direction. There we go. All right. That one just at the right time. There's three scepters. The man in power, whether it be over the agriculture department, we're talking about in Egypt, ancient Egypt. There are certain scepters that are extremely common, used on a regular basis. This is two of those. The one with supposedly the ribs, horizontal ribs, is holding up two scepters that are very, very similar. Now, these things indicate power. Whoever is holding the scepter on the right and the left side is power. He has power. Whoever's holding that scepter, just like whoever's holding the signet ring in ancient days, or the presidential seal, it gives you the authority that comes along with having the power. So these two that are held on the right and the left is indicating power, control. You're in charge of everything. So we're going to look about this particular scepter. Here's another one. These two men are holding, these are gods in their mind, multiple gods, and they're holding the same scepter because they are in charge. They have the power that comes with their office. Oops, am I going backwards? I think I'm going backwards. Whoops, there's the way. All right, here's one that has been found. A lot of these have been found. This is not an unusual scepter because it was so common that the king or the prime minister or whoever was in charge, this was the scepter. What is this? This is a was. This is a was. Now, if that don't ring bells in your head saying, why is this a was? They just called it a was. Don't know why they called it a was. It just was a was. It really was a was. Which means, I guess, it still is a was. Whew, that's rough. So what is it? Yeah. Well, what is it? It is a depiction of an animal. Now, since this depiction of this animal depicts whoever is holding the scepter, he's the boss, he's in control, he's the most powerful. And so you would want, if you were picking out a particular animal that's going to express how powerful you are, then you would want to pick an animal that is powerful in and of itself. So what animal would this be? Well, a lot of people have asked that question. The staff, of course, is the stick, the straight horizontal, straight vertical going up and down. But notice the top and the bottom. The top is the head, but on the bottom there's something that is on every one of these wases. And that is a forked base to this. Here is another one that's found. This one is much more detailed. And it looks ferocious because it is powerful. It's depicting that animal that was powerful. This is the full length of it. This is what is being depicted in the staff called was. Now, the reason for all of this is because I get asked about flying dragons. Now, the Chinese, dragons are mentioned all around the world in ancient history. Fire-breathing dragons are mentioned in history. ancient history, all around the world. Dragons in Asia don't have wings. Dragons in England, Italy, France, those areas, they are sometimes depicted as flying. So the flying part is what ties this in with the dragons, especially those that's found in the Bible whenever I'm teaching these seminars. So notice the foot stance of this particular animal. The head, of course, is real obvious, but it's the feet position that you need to pay attention to. A scepter, normally if you were designing a scepter, you'd take a mean, ferocious head and you'd put it on a stick. But what would you do on the bottom? Would you go to the trouble of making it a forked stance? And would this be something that's common with the was? Not just one or two, but those that you find have this forked stance on the bottom. And that is an indication that it's important. So this particular animal is strong, indicated by its ferocious head. It's strong by its stance, not going to fall over. That animal is secure. And so pterodactyls, pteranodons, and all of that flying reptiles, those things have been around with man. Now, I mentioned the one about the Indians about close to 200 years ago that were out on a hunting party. Storm came up, lightning struck a flying object that they had never seen before. The lightning struck it, killed it. The next day they went out hunting it. They didn't stop until they found it. They described it as having a bald head, long beak with teeth, no feathers. The wingspan was quite wide, but on the first joint of the wings it had claws. And it had the tail, of course, describing the tail. So, and that's the thunderbird is what they referred to it, because it was during a thunderstorm that the bird appeared for the first time and was struck down. Now, you look at the thunderbird, it's been depicted, drawn in several different ways, but if you go back to the old Indian description and drawing of it, it does look much, much more like an ancient animal, which we would consider ancient. The question is, do they still exist? I don't know. Haven't seen one. But when was the last time you saw a praying mantis? One of my favorite animals. When was the last time you saw a horny toad? Probably my favorite animal of all, besides a pig. Much prefer pigs. Just because you don't see them doesn't mean they don't exist. The real cute animal that I showed 2 weeks ago was the Galapagos, and I said it was what did I call it?
Komodo dragon.
Right, Komodo dragon. It was the Galapagos. There were one other thing that I mentioned. That was on the Stegosaurus. I'll shift off here, but while it's on my brain before it falls out. The Stegosaurus that was carved on the temple that was in Cambodia, about date somewhere around 1100 AD. So we can assume that at least in the Cambodian area, Stegosaurus was around in about 1100 AD or shortly thereafter. All right, did dinosaurs fly? No, this is not a dinosaur. But it's big, and evidently it was ferocious. It was not something like a hummingbird. And the reason that I say it was ferocious is because if you're designing a staff that you want to indicate power, strength, you're going to pick an animal that has those particular characteristics. This animal, this pterodactyl or pteranodon, whatever one you're looking at, And there's different sizes, but evidently they were big, as we've found from skeletal remains, at least taller than 6 foot. These flying objects evidently were very powerful and displayed their power enough that everyone would recognize, in Egypt at least, that when I hold that staff, I have power. So that's the link between the two. Where did these things live? Well, logically, if they're depicted in Egypt, where would you expect to find their skeletal remains? Somewhere in that Egyptian area. Marco Polo, if you will remember, we mentioned Marco Polo, did a lot of exploring, and he was told about a box-in canyon that they were killing these unusual flying animals because they were weakened condition. And in this box-in canyon, the people were, with large, long sticks, were knocking them out of the air, and their bones, or the animals themselves, were being piled outside the box-in canyon. So Marco Polo saw this and described it, and it has not been that long ago that Marco Polo ran around. My daughter asked me one time about a school deal, and it was about Ben Franklin, and she said, "Did you know him personally?" Told her no, but it wasn't so long ago that he lived, and she anticipated the fact that I must be as old as Ben Franklin. And I guess, no, I'm not quite as old as Ben Franklin. Questions that come to your mind need to be investigated. If somebody asks you about flying dinosaurs, and especially if you're reading and studying in Job chapter 41, and I hope you spend a good amount of time studying Job 38, 39, 40, and 41. Those 4 chapters. Normally, whenever you read a commentary, the things you read just will make you laugh.